I'm lucky enough to have inherited an organization that was founded by Enzo Ferrari some 70 years ago. Next year will be the 70th anniversary of the foundation of Ferrari. I think the elements of what you see here are elements of engineering and of design that were set in motion 69 years ago. We've just inherited the obligation to continue the tradition, and I think that what you see today, and we'll talk some more about this as I make my remarks, but I think you see the culmination, and I think the completion of a very long road which has taken Ferrari to where it is today. But anyway, thank you very much for having me here today. It is a pleasure to be able to speak to so many young people who are on the course of actively creating their own dream for the future. And I'd like to thank LUISS, in particular Emma Marchionne, who's been a friend for many years, for putting together this initiative. It is a source of great hope for us here, and indeed, it is a source of great hope for all Europeans to see so many people from across the European Union united by your keen interest in the financial markets and your desire to test yourselves against each other and against the realities of those markets. But even more importantly, you're united by your desire to take on challenges, to grow and create something of value. You're putting into practice the ideals upon which the Union was founded, that so far has been failed by so many political authorities who have played with this. So I sincerely hope, and I echo what Emma has said earlier, it is my sincere hope that you have the wisdom and the courage to continue the work that was started some 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and that ultimately will lead to the formation of the European Union. I think it is important. It's an important task. I can only tell you, as part of the generation that failed in bringing this project to completion, that you have a huge task ahead of you, but I do hope that you have the courage and the stamina to bring it home. I wanted to start my remarks today by showing you a brief video about Ferrari because I think it's a good point to begin our conversation tonight. We listed Ferrari in the public markets in October of 2015. And before the listing, I spent a lot of time meeting with potential investors, and I was always puzzled about how difficult it was to explain to them that they had to change the standard way of looking at businesses. Ferrari is indeed, as I mentioned in my remarks outside before we joined this meeting here, is indeed a very profitable business, and it has a business model which is uniquely Ferrari. We sell fewer cars than the market actually wants, and in fact there is a waiting list for all the products that we make, and at times customers are incredibly disappointed because they can't get the car that they want. The yellow car that you saw outside is a limited edition car. Base price of that car is in excess of 400,000 euros. There were 799 units that were allocated. Demand was in excess of 3,000. And so we've had to turn away more than 75% of the demand, but it was done in order to preserve the uniqueness of the brand. And so because of Ferrari's brand power, this has put us in a very strong position when it comes to ability to price. And it's also a key in maintaining high residual values for what we produce. And despite this strange economic model, I find myself constantly having to answer questions about volume growth, which is not a priority for Ferrari in the same way that it would be for somebody who produces mass market cars. But what surprised me most was the reluctance of investors and the reluctance of analysts to see things in a different way. And I'm telling you this because part of the legacy that was left to us by Enzo Ferrari is exactly the ability to look at things differently. If you looked at the world the same way everybody else did, Ferrari would not be the legend that it is today. And so constantly questioning things and having the flexibility and the courage to be able to change your approach is an invaluable trait that I consider to be crucial for long-term success. Now I'm going to share with you a quote from Mark Twain that many of you probably know because it also kicks off the movie The Big Short, which I hope you've seen. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And so it's an apt introduction to the movie's central theme of how and why the subprime crisis had erupted, but I also believe that it serves as an epigraph for the current era. In these times, marked by significant and by rapid change, what were once held as certainties have been swept away, and the business models that we have all been accustomed to and followed for decades are no longer valid. And nowhere has this become even more evident than the car sector itself, an industry which has had a historical track record which has been at best poor, has to accept that a new model to run the business is imperative. The mass producers in particular need to accept that a complete change in the operating model is necessary, and that what we've always cherished historically as independence is no longer sustainable. I've called for consolidation more than once at industry level, as it is the most logical conclusion and the most logical solution to the systemic problems that are facing the automakers. The same disruptive change has taken place in the financial sector, which is something that you understand better, I think. Now, wonderful as it sounded, globalization changed the game, a fact that went unnoticed by the vast majority of participants, including national and global regulators. What we experienced was the inevitable consequence of a system that is completely open in a world where there are no geographic and there are no economic boundaries. The economists described this problem some time back as the fragility of perfection. The greater the interdependence within the system, the more far-reaching the effects of disruption in one part of it. In finance, the originate and distribute model of bank lending, which may have dispersed risk, it also meant that problems in the American housing market damaged banks and investors around the globe. Now, few, if any, would have predicted some of the most powerful investment banks would ultimately collapse, with the effects spreading both worldwide and across sectors. A system that for centuries has been based on integrity, on responsibility, and on trust was suddenly turned upside down by two unrelated factors: the emergence of a greed-driven, self-centered culture and the inadequacy of planning and control mechanisms at board of directors levels. Investment bankers believed in the story of never-ending success, of huge bonuses, while private bankers crossed the line, sometimes more than one, ignoring legal constraints in order to secure new clients. The eventual impact on the financial system was huge. I had the privilege of serving as vice chairman of UBS, the Zurich-based global bank. I joined in early 2007, and I found myself dealing with an organization under severe stress, an experience which, in hindsight, has proven to be invaluable. Like all other banks, UBS was deeply affected, and my fellow directors and I had to rapidly adapt to this new environment. We undertook a major review of the bank's internal structure. We introduced changes, including the relationship among top managers and between management and the board of directors. So 3 chairmen, 3 chief executives, and 3 CFOs later, the bank finally reemerged as a viable financial player. But what the events proved was the inadequacy of today's governance systems. Even more importantly, they pointed to the need to rethink capitalism itself, the reestablishment of markets as being the governing framework for economies, but not for society. There's a subtle distinction in all this, but it is not inconsequential. Markets cannot be the determining factors of a just and of an equitable society, because they have no conscience and they have no moral understanding. Left as the operative mechanism of society at large, they will treat human life as a commodity itself. And this just cannot be. So I'm telling you this because you've chosen to work in the financial sector. In whatever specific area you're interested in, whether it be equities, bonds, derivatives, trading, investments, M&A, portfolio management, risk management, or anything else you like in the financial world, it is important that you understand the nature of financial markets and, above all, your role and your obligation to act responsibly. The power that is wrought by the free markets in a global economy is not the issue. Nobody can hold markets back, or nobody can change how they function. Neither do I think it will be desirable to have that happen. An open and a level playing field guarantees the opportunity for all to compete equally, and free markets have opened the door to opportunities to all of us as never before. But efficiency is not, and it should not be, the only element that we focus on in regulating our lives. There's a limit beyond which profit becomes greed, and those who operate in free markets have an obligation to act within the bounds of good conscience. There's a reality out there that must not be overlooked. We all need to understand that there can never be rational markets. There can never be growth and economic well-being if a large part of our society has nothing to bargain with other than their own lives. And the raw pursuit of profit, detached from moral responsibility, not only robs us of our humanity, but it also jeopardizes our long-term prosperity. And so I'm convinced that we are now at a crucial crossroad. Creating the conditions for virtuous change is the real challenge of our time. To reconstruct efficient and fair economies, separate but interconnected, and to promote globalization that truly serves humanity. Now, one thing that I was asked to do today was to talk to you about the skills and the personal qualities that a multinational like ours expects from someone who joins the organization from a 21st century leader. And I'll start by sharing my own experience when I was more or less I was once your age. And when I first entered the workplace, I figured that I should just emulate my boss. That I should be tough, I should show no heart, I should just execute flawlessly and just do it very quickly. And I thought it was the only way to be a leader, so I acted like that for quite a while. And one day I walked into the office of the top HR guy and I told him that I wanted to be a CFO. And he looked at me and he says, "You're never, ever going to be one." And then he took me to the cleaners about what he thought I was missing, which basically came down to the human skills that was needed to interface with people. And so I walked out of his office almost devastated. I had been emulating the CFO and I thought I was doing a pretty good job. And that conversation led me to some severe soul searching. And I realized that I've been doing things that were totally out of character for me, that I had accepted a need, and that I needed to accept the need to change. And began to understand that a command and control approach worked only for the short term, because folks do what you say only because they fear you, but it severely limits how long people will follow you and how well they will do with their assignments. So I now no longer try to emulate anyone. The way I am today is completely in character with who I am, and I'm absolutely comfortable with what I do. Today at SCA, as well as Ferrari and CNH, we have zero interest in people who are individual superstars. The era of a single great man who succeeds by imposing his will on the organization is gone and done. I personally spend the equivalent of about a month every year on 1,000 HR reviews because I'm a fanatical believer about the importance of leadership. And these reviews center on two qualities that I believe are essential to being a successful leader. The first is the ability to lead an agenda of change. As I said in my opening, change is inevitable and it occurs now at such an accelerated pace in an era of globalization and rapid technological advance. You cannot afford to blindly hold on to your ways of doing things, even if they worked well in the past. Nevertheless, whenever you try to initiate serious change, you will encounter a chorus of cynics who will tell you that it won't work and that things are just not done that way. As cynicism is easy, it takes both vision and courage to believe in something better. So I go all out to surround myself with people who are capable of leading in a world where certainty is not available, who are comfortable to operate in a world of flux, people who can envision things that could be instead of things the way they've always been, and people who are willing to risk to live in the discomfort of failure, people who ask questions and challenge long-held assumptions. And the second essential trait of a leader is their capacity to lead people. I constantly remind them that one of our fundamental responsibilities is to provide guidance and to provide support for other people in developing their professional abilities and their human qualities. When all is said and done, the true value of a leader is not measured by what he's gained during his career, but rather by what he's given. It's not what he has accomplished today, but the legacy that he will leave behind. So a lesson that I've learned over my career is that in every organization, people count more than process. Especially within such a large multinational organization as ours, the most important element is the human connection, the millions of human relationships that must be nourished every day. Besides defining development plans and deploying strategies, a real priority resides on a much more human level. This means that we recognize the impact that our choices have on our people and on society as a whole. It means that we fully accept the responsibility that comes with the privilege of leadership. And I believe this is the true essence of leadership, personally assuming the moral duty to do something, to act, to take part in the process of building the future, acknowledging one's own responsibility to give future generations hope for something better. Now, there are two more things before I take your questions, some advice and then an invitation. And advice not because I've been overcome by wisdom that I need to pass on to you, but simply because you are at the outset of your career, or you're preparing to take that step, and I would like to share with you what I see as the most important qualities for the next generation of leaders. My first recommendation is that whatever strong beliefs you now hold, stay open to changing yourself and to change your path. If you get stuck in a workplace that stifles your creativity and stifles your development, recognize what is happening and do the utmost to get out and get into a better place. Second, remember that we are called to a higher purpose, which is to pursue our goals with respect for human dignity and the needs of our society, both for today as well as for future generations. It completely changes your outlook on life if you point your efforts to the simple objective of trying to make a difference. And my third bit of advice is whatever you do, always aim high and dream big. For one very simple reason, because mediocrity is never, ever worth the trip. And the last thought I'd like to leave with you is a passage from a great work of science fiction by Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. It goes like this: everyone must leave something behind when he dies, my grandfather said. It doesn't matter what you do, he said, so long as you change something from the way it was before you touched it into something that's like you after your hands are taken away. The difference between a man who just cuts lawns and a real gardener is in the touching. The lawn cutter might just as well not have been there at all. The gardener will be there for a lifetime. Bradbury is right. The value that we bring to anything is best measured by what remains after we are gone. It's measured by what we have changed for the better. It lives on in those that we have helped to grow. And this is the message of hope and also the invitation I'd like to leave with you today. Whatever you decide to do with your future, always do it with a very simple objective in mind, and that is to make a difference every day. But be like gardeners, invest in your energies and your talents in such a way that everything you do endures a lifetime or even longer. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to taking your questions.